Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Feeling Thursday Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. As you can probably hear from my voice, I am sick again, but it's quite mild. So depending on who shows up, I may or may not have things to note. Also, you know, certain of these matchups might still provoke me to say something. But I, strictly speaking, don't have a confirmation on stream sound yet. Regardless of that, though, matches are starting.
Round 1. Ready? Go!
We reviewed quite a bit of things about this game over the last few weeks, and we've gotten up a couple more of our bots, at least within personal training points. But we haven't actually put all that much effort into improving damage so far, which is going to be, you know, a problem when other people show up, but for now it's okay. For now, we get to enjoy the game in the sense of other aspects of it. Footsie. And this is very important because regardless of how good you are at the game otherwise, how much damage you can output, the effectiveness of your point character in the point match is really important, and that is one of the places where you need to be able to play footsie is the best. Unless you're Angel, in which case you just get to poke at people and destroy them, but you still have to get at least one specific part of it right. And that one specific part of it hasn't really changed. Understanding your ranges, but also when to run or dash up to your opponent. And when they are likely to run or dash up to you. This is another one of those games where running and dashing is a really specific way to get your attack on. And understanding if your opponent will do it because you're defensive, or the other way around, still makes a massive difference. But it's fairly easy to dash up and then defend. And because it's easy to dash up and defend, your opponent doesn't always have a good reason to throw out whatever move, meaning you could also just attack. Especially if you think they have only one good option for stopping you, that would then keep them safe if you decided to not attack. This is different for zoning characters a bit, but not terribly so. The main thing you generally need to understand against zoners is that the game is built for you to hop. That is still part of the gameplay. And of course jumping if you can't manage the hopping itself. So just because you don't actually spend a lot of time doing that, or you prefer to play footsies in the quote-unquote normal way, you shouldn't necessarily completely discount the idea that jumping properly or hopping is correct to do in the game as a whole. You just have to think more about whether or not it's happening because you don't know what else to do, or because it's the right time to do it. The importance of this drastically increases when your character doesn't have specific ways of countering projectiles or long-range moves of their own. Because while dashing can help, hopping will often help you get around those moves more. This isn't true for every character, obviously, though. And you should definitely look into whether or not yours is specifically useful for it or not. But always remember that someone who is trained well enough, even though you don't necessarily take a lot of damage or get hurt for jumping, and there are definitely characters that can really put the hurt on you for doing it when they've got enough meter, you are not necessarily getting everything you can out of it if you can't convert off it. And sometimes that means you have to go for the jump that you know is going to pay off, or at least are fairly confident is going to pay off, and don't just hope it works. You have to commit. You have to believe that it's going to work. And the worst that'll happen if you're wrong is pretty much nothing. Whatever was going to happen is probably happening anyway. It is at that point where your opponent has to think about all of the other things that can happen and force you to play that whiff punish game. But the ability to play the whiff punish game is pretty good for characters that have long range things, particularly long range grabs. So you should be able to get a decent match out of it just by making them think you're going to hop and then whiff punishing whatever else. Our plans for today in terms of characters, different group members will show up later, assuming that they can even manage to join, because we have been having some trouble with that recently. Right, I don't play this with Mary because it's silly in terms of the original matchup. I should definitely give DeWolf some practice fighting Mary with Joe at some point in the future. But Chris is actually a lot of the same principles, so we have a good reason to do it this way. With the only real difference being that I can't just approach from the front by doing the same move over and over. I have to actually think about which approach to use. This is helpful because it trains my opponent to be more so proactively defensive, even if it's just in terms of thinking through what I'll do, instead of not. Chris as a character goes around a lot of things.
Ready, go!
And going around a lot of things is usually the way to get yourself beat up in this game, if your opponent is very defensive. But it's not so bad if they're not. Even in this sort of situation where it's somewhat laggy, the main problem I'm having here is more so combo control than anything else. As you can see, my opponent has to do a lot more in terms of figuring out whether or not it's a good idea to come forward. And I get a lot of stuff when it comes to being in particular close frames situations. Joe's main weaknesses, in fact, are based on that. He spends a lot of time in animations for his defensive moves. So if you bait him into doing them too often, especially if you've got good punishes on deck yourself, even your point character can get through that match without a lot of trouble if you understand how to make the Joe player actually do things. Wrong one. Unfortunately, we're still battling whatever it is that causes us to have this weird desynced rollback. I think we've definitely learned that it's someone's system that's causing it because the game likes to sync a specific way, but we can't really do that much about it. This, for example, is a matchup that's mostly based around the idea that Kukri has to stay out of Shermie's way. Like, he has to stay out of Shermie's way. If he can do it, then it's fine. If he can't, then it often gets very dirty. Fortunately, he has a lot of moves that do a good job of this, as long as she's not going to figure out when he's about to jump. And of course, if it's laggy, therefore, you have a little bit more advantage. As you pretty much can't defend against what you can't see. But this is the opposite. Geese doesn't need to react to Kukri things. Geese can just fight forward all the time. The damage he will take for doing this is so minor that you really don't care. Not to say that you won't get hit. So if this were a different matchup where Kukri was the one... I think I was supposed to combo that. If Kukri was the one with the health advantage, this would be a problem. Because eventually all the little hits would add up. But here, it's just, okay, don't die too much before the time comes. Because it's so hard to confirm most of Kukri's stuff into things that actually kill geese. I thought I was going to get the close one. Too far. I'm all focused now because I can't see anything. But hopefully it'll work out in a bit. My opponent can't see anything either. But I'm the one with meters, so at least I have an advantage there.
Select members. Select order. Select stage. Get ready for a battle of titans! Round one. Ready? Go!
This is such an incredibly accuracy-heavy match with much of the same challenges that you would see from before. Athena doesn't really have to run up and block Joe because she can just do other things that are innately misleading. But I actually don't know how laggy this is, so I can't say either. She doesn't move so fast as to be unreactable, but it's definitely problematic at least sometimes. boys' hitboxes are so weird sometimes.
Player 1 wins!
Thunder music.
Round 3, ready, go!
Well, I've got two reports now. One is that this isn't actually laggy, which is great. And second is that Oni Rabbit absolutely cannot manage to get into this lounge. So we're probably going to start doing the thing we were planning to do in this situation. This is of course our NA lounge, our generally US East Coast lounge, but if you've got any decent connection to people on the East Coast, you might as well give it a try. And in this case, that lounge is probably better if you don't.
Ready, go!
If you are somewhere in, let's say, Central or South America and have really good internet and are near the Atlantic Ocean, probably you want to join this one.
Player 2 wins!
But yeah, you can head out and search for Omni Rabbit if you would like to join a separate lounge. That will obviously probably not be on stream for a long time, if at all. King absolutely cannot afford to let Chizuru get in at this point. But relatively well baited.
Winner!
悪いがこっちはあんたみたいなのとは戦い慣れてるからな。
Select members. Select order. Select stage. Nothing will stop this show. とっととかかってこい
Ralph is similarly extra effective in this matchup at times because he slips through a lot of what Joe is trying to do and isn't very punishable. You can take bigger risks as Joe to get stuff, but you really don't necessarily want to be doing that too much, even with Point Ralph, who doesn't have enough meter to do terrible things to you. But this looks as if it's laggy even from here.
Player 1 wins! Now or never! Ready?
Leona's job in this matchup is a bit harder, as she tends to go relatively straightforward and Joe can beat a lot of those things. However, despite the fact that he is actually relatively fast at crossing the screen, he's not actually terribly good at dealing with her grenades, mainly because his moves tend to take so long to animate and he doesn't get into the space for them. So she's better at zoning him than you might expect. Unfortunately, you can't generally keep this up for too long because he'll just dodge through the first one. So it's not quite zoning so much as it is doing that instead of advancing, to force the other player to think about the fact that they should advance, or at least shift around a little bit so they don't get grenades thrown at them. Kukri is way better at dealing with grenades, but not so good at dealing with Leona just alternating between grenades and rushing. The more meter she has, the more dangerous this becomes. This has a lot to do with the fact that in the normal way of thinking about this matchup, he has to be thinking about the air, but she's good at hanging in the air, and therefore able to dodge a bunch of his stuff, as just demonstrated. And he's not great at attacking that spot on screen. He's decent at getting out of the way, but getting out of the way, especially preemptively, would mostly lead to your opponent just throwing more grenades at you. King, on the other hand, covers both of these situations. She deals with grenade throwing and she deals with aerial stuff. Leona can play this match really defensively if you're really careful, but if you're at a meter disadvantage, your best bet is often to just not do anything in particular. Or maybe to put it another way, never commit to anything. You're always looking for that moment where you can make King block, but you don't actually care about hitting her. You're just stalling for a really long time so that she ends up whipping meter or something. You need to get your meter up, not necessarily to hit her with it, though you could, but simply because getting hit by King's meters is bad. Fortunately, she's not terribly good at using it in this matchup, so you get to push back a little bit more. And lots of misleading to deal with all that. You still count it as an OCV in this case, I think.
私が勝ち、あなたは負けた。それ以外に意味はない。
Select members. first order. Select stage. Get ready for a battle of titans!
Well, there goes all semblance of me not having a completely nasal voice today. This is a very rolling, heavy match for Ralph. Fortunately, he has lots of reach once he's rolled, so he doesn't have to worry as much, and when he gets the punishes, Shune really needs to care. Shune in turn generally is a little bit better off not fighting from the ground too much. Ralph can totally counter those things, but because he tends to have more linear stuff and has to wait for Shune to get close enough for most anti-airs to properly work, it at least increases the stress on the Ralph player if you are in the air more often. This doesn't work on Clark mainly because Clark has a higher standing heavy kick and more options in spaces for just doing stuff after air to airs that Ralph kind of lacks. This matchup, on the other hand, is the reverse. It's Ralph that wants to be in the air most of the time, because he can hang there long enough to mess with Dolores' various responses, forcing her to respond to a lot of his air stuff without using her usual methods. She often has to jump and hit him out of the air herself, or just evade and then get a bunch of weird combos. Of course, you could simply learn the other option, push it so that you are ready for your opponent to dive at you and perfectly catch that. But then they'll just start jumping without doing it and you won't be ready. Then we have the same thing, more or less again. It's easier to go into the air to deal with Leona, even though she's technically good at hitting you in those positions. Interestingly, this often means that Leona has to fight fairly defensively, but it's hard to explain the exact reason why that is. The best way to put it is that if she attacks too much, the chances that she will miss Dolores increase too much. You have to be really confident in your actual attacks, because they have relatively long animations compared to Dolores' various options for punishing. But, of course, playing more defensively doesn't really have the same problems. Another complication is that when you're playing a charged character against a character that can teleport to the other side of you, your life gets a little harder. But since Leona's better defensive move is a down charge and not a back forward charge, it's not as bad. Terry's main advantage here is that he is long. The additional reach really helps against his character. And as the anchor character, you do know that generally if you mess up even one of your attacks against someone who is really good at his combos, you're just dead. And of course he can just spend meter to do that. But then we've got it turned around again. Orochi Yashiro does not care about basically anything Terry does ever. It is almost ridiculous how little he cares about Terry's stuff. This has to do with the fact that Terry uses a lot of movements that are specifically meant to keep you just outside of range, whereas Orochi Yashiro, for most purposes, should be considered to functionally have infinite range. Fortunately, Terry, strictly speaking, also has infinite range, so at some point you could just decide to go ham and hope that Yashiro is trying to make use of his at the same time.
Select members. Select order. Select stage.
Well, it seems our heavy hitter is off to join Omni Rabbit's lounge and see whether or not that shifts anything. Whereas I am testing out something that I have been thinking about for a while. You cannot just use Shermie's counters and anti-airs to stop Athena, because she will just ignore you. And she can just ignore you. But I have an idea for a thing that she can't ignore as easily.
One. Ready? Go!
See, because that'll happen. Your opponent isn't necessarily going to play very offensively in that situation. In fact, this match is relatively heavily set up that way. It's not ever going to be too hard for Athena to know whether or not offense is happening or should happen at the moment. And she can react to basically all of Shermie's main attack styles. Oh no, it doesn't work. I was trying to see whether or not you could get the grab from the heavy kick at the max range. Because if you don't hit the heavy kick, you can bait her into doing responses that will get her beat up. But if you just get hit, then it doesn't solve anything. That was supposed to be something else, but we'll go with it. Iori deals with this way better because, for whatever reason, they decided that his grab just doesn't care. Gotta be careful about using the EX1 though. It is incredibly fast, but has no range. A great defense, or bait for when you get really close, and it works on Isla too, but it's so painful when you miss it. Nope, wrong one. Unfortunately for Isla, she does take a lot of time to get certain things started.
Turn to fight. Ready, go!
Chizuru does not, though. Sometimes I worry that even her role is too good. Which means that this matchup is generally a lot of guesswork. She goes through so many things that you always have to be figuring out which way is the right way to be stopping her from whatever she's into today.
Select members. Select order. Select stage. Get ready for a battle of titans! Round one. Ready? Go! Reach for the top. Ready? Go! Ready? Go! Stand your ground. Ready? Go!
Today's concert is very much more chill than I'm used to.
Final round. Ready? Go! Select members. Select order. Select stage. Get ready for a battle of titans! Round one. Ready? Go!
Ralph doesn't have a lot of way to deal with this matchup head-on because even rolling doesn't help. Going into the air doesn't necessarily help. In fact, there's just not a lot of stuff that directly helps. It's a little bit easier, therefore, to make him not point character for this matchup. But from our side, it looks like this has fallen out of sync or something. And that usually means that you're not going to get to see the rest of this match or the next one. But sometimes it synchronizes on its own, just not usually from here. Alright, well that exploded in some way that I can't tell, but whatever resolved it for them is not helping us. So we have jumped in on this end, just in case there's enough time to get to see a match or two. Sounds like our previous two fighters did in fact get to finish their match, but there was no chance that we would get to see it either way, so. By the time this one's over, chances are that we will be close to the end of our stream, even though it won't necessarily be the close up of either lounge, really. But I guess, strictly speaking, I don't know who's in charge of the other one right now.
Select members. Select order. Select stage. Nothing will stop this show.
Well, this gives us our one chance for today to see how the other side lives. Last time we actually had a specific type of match where the flow was in fact very footsie heavy and there was a lot to learn about it, but generally this isn't something you should necessarily expect, particularly not from players at the champion level. I know that sounds weird, but it has to do with the way that the game rewards that approach as opposed to the other. One of them leads to what most people consider functional pressure, and the other leads to having to do with punishes and cancels in neutral. That said, as always, once you've learned to deal with the hops and learned the spacings for your own stuff, it's not so hard to deal with the idea of someone doing this, except that it can be a little off-putting in terms of thinking that you should get to play something else, which is one of the things that brings down quite a lot of people. If your opponent is basically just hopping at you all of the time and putting you into hop defense mode, as soon as you do get an advantage, it's easy to want to do something else. And it's almost always a bad idea. For certain characters, this makes your life a little bit easier in a different way, but for most of them, it's just a matter of understanding when to put yourself in a space where your opponent's jump will fail. And that's generally the, I wouldn't say only thing you get to do, but it's definitely a large part of what you get to do. So until you've managed to learn that aspect of the game, which I think mostly would come from facing... which bot is that? Ralph? Your life is going to be a little bit frustrating sometimes. But that is still the key. When it is not your turn, against an opponent who just hops all the time, your only real option, in most cases, is to move to the spot on screen where it will be easiest to anti-air or mess with their hop. For certain characters, this is really frustrating and doesn't lead to anything good at all. And for others, it's kind of fun. Fortunately, it is one of those things where once you've done it well enough for long enough, it will generally shift your opponent to not just hop at you all the time. It is one of the few ways in this game to discourage it, and if it doesn't discourage it, if you succeed at doing it well enough, you actually tend to just straight win. Unlike many other things in other games where you're not really gaining so much by doing the right thing that your opponent is incentivized to stop. But this is in fact one of those things.
Battle of Titans.
And I get the feeling, based on the Robert Point character, that we're about to see some of that. Because they also didn't pick very, very hop-heavy characters. So, we'll see what happens. This is, of course, the last on-stream match of the night, so if you put up with my voice for this long,
Ready?
you get something beneficial out of it. Yep, automatic. Robert is so good at doing this under most circumstances that it's just, you just don't even think about it. You just move and that's it. But let's look therefore at when Nimbus Moro actually takes any damage. That, for example, I feel was more so misspaced than anything else. As was that, slightly. You can do this in most fighting games, honestly. The problem is that this game requires it, whereas most other games it's just a nice bonus to a ground game that you're already playing. Chizuru has some other options, which is probably good. So it's not likely to continue all of the time. But you did get to see that you ended up with a solution to the problem. There's no hopping here. Other options are being used instead. And Ralph is probably going to do a decent job of countering most of those, but there has not been one hop yet. Because that's simply not how it will work out. Ralph no longer even has to deal with that much health, but them 4 bars might matter, as he is relatively easier to whiff punish than a lot of other characters for her. And she does tend to win in neutral. But I can't say it's completely dominant. So we'll see what happens. Confirm. Into explosion. Our work on our Leona and Ash bot are not quite done yet. Various things have come up, sickness, other little things. And so we've been delayed in terms of how effective we can be certain that they are. We might still have some stream tomorrow, and there's a chance that we'll even get the bot out. But usually we don't like to put out the bot without the disc guidance at all, so we'll see. I did not know if that I was going to kill or not. Kind of important if it did or didn't. And I feel like they were fishing for a confirm off that crouch heavy punch and did not get it. Well, we do have a Cronin bot, and we now have a Yashiro bot, so you can feel free to check out either of those on our website, 2-mk.org. And since this game saves at least one bot, it's not so bad. We're still working on figuring out why exactly it loses the bot occasionally, but no, nothing yet. So with that explosion, you can check tomorrow at 7:30 Eastern on our Twitter 2_MK_FGC to find out whether or not we are actually streaming anything. But since it's unlikely, you might just not see any tweet there by about 7:45, which will tell you, nope, not happening.
Select member.
But that brings us to the end of this stream, and you can join in if you want somewhere else. I don't know who's in charge of that lounge, but this has been Rillian for Team 2MK. Good luck with your training. Good night, everyone.
Select stage.